Hello, Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones, and with me whenever possible is...
Scott Miller. Good morning.
Good morning. And today's, with this delayed episode, because this has been such an important episode, we've been trying to get Jaz here for a while. We have Jaz Colibri. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, Colibri, yeah.
Colibri, awesome. She is a... I would say formerly unhoused. She was involved with the Wood Street encampment, which was the largest encampment in Oakland for a while now. And I met her when she was volunteering to help out the remaining unhoused on 42nd and Martin Luther King before they had a sweep. Jaz has been really involved with helping folks in these encampments, especially with these sweeps. And so we want to talk with her because she's the boots on the ground. She knows what's going on. And I know she's going to have a lot of great things to tell us. So thank you so much for joining us, Jaz.
Thank you so much for having me.
Totally. So first off, why don't you get into your story a little bit, and how did you end up at the Wood Street encampment?
Yeah, well, so I ended up at Wood Street. Basically, when I first drove out here 4 years ago, I had some friends who were already kind of tapped in and supporting folks there, and I was living in basically at the time walk-in closet that was turned into a bedroom that they were charging as its own room, and I transferred from the Target I was working at to a Target out here, but then when I saw the sweeps and what was happening to basically the war on the poor that was happening out here, it just didn't make sense for me to be putting as much time into a job that was just going to keep me in a closet that when there's people and support is needed out on the ground, and it just so I ended up quitting my full-time job, and I couldn't afford the room anymore, so but I knew a bunch of people that were living on Wood Street, so they sort of welcomed me in with open arms, because we had built that relationship together from using my off time to just go spend time with them, see what was going on, because I saw that they had a really beautiful community structure set up. There was active just people looking out for each other and doing the best with what they had, and because everyone from all over Oakland, the cops were basically saying, go to Wood Street. We won't mess with you there. Go to Wood Street. So you got this big concentration of people, and that had been there for a good decade or so. So those relationships were really built in. So it just it felt like such a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of. And when I basically lost my housing, and just to be welcomed into that, with no questions asked, and just to feel fully accepted, and be able to integrate into that, and then also devote more of my time to the sweeps that are still happening every day. It's a daily onslaught on unhoused folks, and it was clear that more able-bodied people were needed to help people move their stuff, or just hold shelter. We were able to shelter in place more before the safe work zone ordinance. So a lot of it was just being present with people, being a buffer between the cops and them, or the city employees, and just letting people know they aren't alone, and that because a lot of the folks out on the streets are disabled, and it's the standards that the city is setting for them to just up and move their entire lives is not accessible to a lot of people. So just trying to safeguard in that way, and make sure people don't lose everything.
As far as I've never actually, I've witnessed some here. I live around the lake, so I've witnessed some. But is there any kind of physical altercations? Does the city or the cops or anybody physically threaten these people who are differently abled, or do people voluntarily go? Is there any kind of physical confrontations that take place?
Yeah, there have been physical confrontations. I remember at one of the sweeps on Wood Street, a resident came back. Basically, he went off to walk his dog and to get something, to check in about where he was going to maybe move some of his stuff. And he came back. And by the time he had gotten back, the city had basically thrown everything that he had into a dump truck. And so he comes back with his dog and he sees, okay, all my shit's gone, even though you said you were going to give me time to move it. So he's upset, clearly. And so he spit in the general direction of like the bulldozer thing that they had. But then the worker that was on the bulldozer made a whole show of it and was like, oh my God, he spit on me, and ran to the cops. And so the cops are conferring about it. And then he goes and walks off his dog again. But then when he comes back the second time with his dog, 8 cops tase and tackle him.
Oh, Jesus.
And said that he assaulted the DPW worker when he was literally just up, like he saw his whole life get disappeared, and he spit because he was upset. And then 8 cops just jumped him, and like they had to bring an ambulance out to take the like taser claws out of him. You could like hear him screaming inside the truck. And then they brought him to Rita after that for a couple days. And then we were like trying to track him, and they released him. They were trying to like pull some other charges and shit. It was a whole ridiculous thing. And then sometimes they've even like torn down structures while people were inside. Like that happened on Wood Street as well. There was like a couple trying to move their stuff out of it. They had like a built wooden structure, and the dingo like started crunching the outside of it. And they're like, whoa, we're still in here. And like they had to come out, and then like the supervisors were like, oh wait, let's slow down, even though that was supposed to just be a deep cleaning. That wasn't even supposed to be a full eviction. And I've also seen cops and city workers knife open people's tents in the past, like just straight up, or like take a battering ram to someone's built house's door just because they weren't home, even though there was clearly a lock outside the door. And if someone locks their house from the outside, that usually means they're off at work or they're off taking care of their business and they're going to be back. But they just broke the door down, and because no one was there, they decided to tear it down before the person could even get back to say, yeah, I still live here. Like, and we've had there, I mean, I had a supervisor actually like pull and push me because I was trying to prevent him from throwing away a disabled person's walker and grills.
Oh.
Like basically the things he has to cook with. Like he was trying to toss them in the dump truck, and I like put my hand on the grill like, hey, don't throw this away. And then he grabs the grill and tries to pull it out of my hand. So he basically pulls me into the street with the grill. And I'm like, no, please just let go. This is like all he has to cook with. And he's like, no, it's going in the dump truck. And then eventually he let go of that, but then he starts going for the guy's walker. I'm like, hey, don't throw that away. And on his way to the walker, he leaves the walker, grabs the other grill. And I like tried, like I'm basically moving after him, like, hey, please don't throw that away. And then he turns around and goes, Jazz, and shoves me with his hand forward into my chest, like step back. And like, it's like, that's the kind of like, they're totally, but then they'll say that they need all these cops and they need the whole safe work zone ordinance. Like they used that instance where they tackled and tased the guy, but they left out the part that the cops did that. They just used the fact that he spit, they said, on a worker, but it was at the like bulldozer. But so they basically used that as the example of why they needed to have the cops be there to and need the caution tape, when really it's just an excuse for them to set up caution tape around someone's home and be like, if you don't leave, you're going to be under arrest. So it basically criminalizes the shelter in place that people were doing because they didn't have anywhere else to go, or the shelter wasn't accessible to them. So they would just be like, well, you haven't offered me anything better than what I currently have, which is oftentimes a built structure or an RV, like these permanent, like the closest you can get to permanent housing by your own means if you can't afford to actually like pay for a spot. And basically the tool sheds that they're offering as shelter, or the congregate shelters, like that's not like better or comparable to people who have already figured out their own sources of electricity, water, and like all these things, when the cabins don't even have that. So it's just like, of course people aren't going to take that. But if you make it illegal for people to stay in their homes so you won't tear them down, then yeah, you're going to be able to, if people aren't able to move their stuff, then they basically are left with nothing. Like this recently at a situation at Estuary Park, we had a bunch of people living in RVs, and usually we have time to like tow people's vehicles, but this time they barricaded us out with cop cars and said, you can't bring the truck in, you can't move anyone's vehicles, we're taking them. And like, and this was like unheard of. And they're trying to use the whole bullshit of like, well, if it's not registered to the person living in it, even though like multiple people that the vehicles were registered to and were letting people stay in them came and tried to be like, hey, that's mine, can you let us move it? And they were like, no, here's the tow yard information. If you show your proof of ownership or registration to the tow yard, then they'll maybe release it to you. So like people ended up with nothing. Like they had their permanent homes taken from them. And so, yeah, of course, a couple of them were like, yeah, I'll take a cabin because it's a roof over my head. But it's like, it's a temporary roof. It's like you can get kicked out of there at any time. Most of them have a certain amount of time you can stay there. And more often than not, people are recycled back into the street and not gotten access to actual housing afterwards. So it recreates, it's basically this money laundering scheme at the end of the day, where it sounds like we can't make money off of you on the street, so we're going to put you in a concentration camp where as long as you're in there and your name's on our list, we can make money off of your body until we put you back in the street, and then we can put you back in the program again. And it's this endless loop.
So it's a cycle of violence and exploitation for city profit, essentially.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, that's so brutal. And what about like groups like Operation Dignity that actually receive money to supposedly help out? They were there at the sweep I was at with you. Do they actually help people? I mean, does it seem like it's a good use of city money and county money?
Yeah, basically the position they're in is they get people access to coordinated entry. So basically, to get access to any of the shelter programs, they have to enter you into their system. And basically it's because that's the weird thing about the housing and the shelter. It's like all in this like coordinated entry system that like all like certain nonprofits or certain service providers have access to. And they run a couple of the cabin sites, but not all of them. They used to run an RV site. They don't anymore. But like, that's the thing. Like for all the money that they're getting, I've seen very little results in terms of actually housing people. And also like the people that they like to take credit for housing there were other orgs involved in that process and getting them into that housing. Like most of the people that I've seen get housed, like were working with Lifelong Medical and like these other orgs. And because they had like pre-existing medical conditions or were elders, it bumped them up on the list. So like that got them into housing. It wasn't because, like the service providers at the site were doing such a good job of like keeping track of people's paperwork and making sure they're getting to meetings on time. Actually, more often than not, the people that are getting housed are the people that are making a point to be on their caseworker's ass and like nonstop communicating and like calling them and being like, hey, I still haven't heard back about this, or you all said this, like, why isn't this working? Like I've heard people like getting their paperwork lost a lot of the time at these cabins. Like they'll be talking to a different org and like they'll like hack or something, and hack will be like, well, you qualify for this, that, and this. I don't know why it didn't go through. And then someone will be like, well, the workers there said my paperwork was missing. And it's just like, there's very little community. Like all these groups, all these orgs are like working in silos and not like effectively communicating with each other. So it's like, it becomes like, you got all this money going all into all these different places, and they're completely ignoring that like all of these service providers are middle people. Like they're case manglers, as my friend Tiny at Homefulness likes to call it, which if you all haven't met them yet, you should definitely check out Homefulness.
Tiny, I know about Tiny. Tiny, Poor Magazine.
Yeah, they're dope as fuck. But like, that's the thing. Like if you just took that same money and just put it into permanent housing or just gave it to the people who need it, it's like there's like data shows that like that will instrumentally help people way more than just like all these. Like like all these jobs that exist around homelessness, it's not like those jobs are going to go away if you move the money around. Like we still need mental health care workers. We still need personal care attendants. Like we still need people who are down to support folks. And like those folks that are doing the labor for those orgs could still have jobs like that are like about actually, but like jobs that actually do fundamentally care about people. Like the way those jobs are set up right now, they don't provide actual care to people. They're just like putting people on lists and moving people's bodies around and like coordinating people to other people who are then going to have meetings with them about something. It's not like, and it's not like actual support. They're not building relationships with people in like a sustainable way where they're really accessing like their individual needs, and also like getting an understanding of like who is the community that you're connected to, how can we keep your whole community together in a space and house you together. Like that's like one of the key things that causes return to the streets often, because like even when they do house people, they're isolating them, they're separating them, or they're putting them in some other city somewhere else when all their friends and family are still here in Oakland. So it's like so people come back, they like are hanging, they're spending most of their time out with the people they know and love and care for, rather than actually being in the apartment that was like supposed to be the thing that was gonna like heal them. But like that's the thing, it's more than just a roof. You need like actual like community and like support and mental health stuff, and just like things to be involved in, like that's what's gonna like help people like grow from being treated like trash every single day and grow out of that, like that feeling of like your life isn't worth shit.
It's really interesting that you would say, like, you know, I had never thought about this, the whole idea that not only are the organizations that are supposed to be helping homeless people, they're siloed, but the very process of trying to get somebody sheltered silos that person from their own community. Yeah. So essentially like there's a lack of community building happening on both sides of the equation. Like the whole thing's like isolating isolating people who need houses, and the people who are isolating the people who need houses are isolated themselves. Yeah, so, like that's yeah. So that, but you know, I mean, I find an interesting observation because it's about lack of community awareness, lack of community building, and disrespect for communities that already exist.
Yeah,
that's really like, you know, thank you for that insight. I had never really thought about it like that before.
Yeah, and it's also it brings up a good point too, because you know, there is these communities here. There are these people helping each other, you know, like the outside, if you ask any, you know, soccer mom or something, they're going to be scared of the unhoused. They see the encampments and they go, oh God, I don't want to look at that. But I mean, you've been in it and you know, these people are good and are helping each other. I mean, what was life like at the Wood Street encampment?
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like the city does such a good job of depicting unhoused people as like crime, as like the derelicts, as like the
drug addiction
people. Yeah, drug addicted, like Scot, like blight. They use the word blight to describe human beings. Like, and it's just like, but like that's the thing. It's, you can't be unhoused and be lazy. Like, it's not a thing that you could do. You would die if you were lazy and unhoused. Like it takes so much fucking labor to just make sure you have the food that you need, that you like have because yeah, a lot of people like the drug thing is real. Like when you have been told that your life isn't worth shit and people treat you like trash every day, and like you need to have all the energy in the world to be able to hustle to get enough money to eat, to make sure you have shelter for the night, to make sure you can have a place to use the bathroom, like all of that takes physical labor and making sure you have certain materials around you, like, and access to electricity and figuring out where you're going to get access to water and like that. And like we live in a world where you need money to access those things, and if you don't have the physical energy to like be on it like that, like yeah, so some people use like uppers to like get that energy because they're like deep in like it's like trying to like rise above like the depression that comes from just like being treated less than human 24/7, but then also like if you are dealing with chronic pain, which a lot of people on the streets are, because they're constantly overexerting our bodies just to like hustle and do the shit we got to do to survive, then yeah, you're gonna use like the stuff that you have access to. If you can't get access to medical because hospitals are turning you away because you have previous history of addiction and that sort of stuff, like medical care becomes just another institution that's going to discard you, that's going to harm you. So it's like street drugs is what you have access to. So people are using like narcotics to like numb the pain, but then they're also using uppers to like get enough energy to do what they got to do. So they're not like swelling out. But like when people are in communities, like if that's the like drugs that you have access to like make that work for your body and to like get the shit done that you need to get done, at least you're not using alone. Like there's like safety in place, like people are checking on each other, people are like, and if people are noticing, okay, wait, you're getting close, like you're ODing or something, like people I know that have brought people out of ODs, like people's lives are being saved. So it's like, and like as far as like just the community aspect of it, like we're feeding each other. Like at Wood Street, like I would come back from the sweeps and like I would nap with the animals on the couch because I'd be fucking wiped after the sweep. But then like I'd be checking in with people. I'd be letting them know what happened that day, see what was going on for them. And then maybe John and I, we would go to like the Pack and Save and like use our EBT to get some food and bring back to cook on the grills that we had set up. We had like a fire pit set up and everything. And we would have enough food so that people coming through the night could just come and grab a plate on their way. Or like if people were passing through and needed a place to sleep, we had couches set up, we had canopies and different things. Like, yeah, we had people that had their like built structures and vehicles and tents and stuff on the lot already, but we had common spaces that we intentionally built there because we know there's people going through it all the time. There's people out there with nothing but the shirt on their back and they need a place to be able to rest too. And we had a space that became like a safe haven for people, because it's like we had community agreements where like they're like, that's the thing, when unhoused communities form, they form out of like an organic need to protect one another against the harmful systems that have discarded us. And that actually when that happens, crime goes down, because you have people who are in a state of desperation, in a state of need, but are meeting each other where we're at and being like, oh, wait, I may not have everything in the world, but I have access to this and you have access to that. And together we can make this. And when people are doing that to meet their own needs, like the need to go out and like do more risky things just to feed yourself and your family becomes lessened. But then we're seeing like when the sweeps happen, like when Wood Street was wiped out, there was actually an uptick in crime. And it's like, actually, when you disperse these communities, you recreate the situation. Like I had countless people that I lived with on Wood Street be like, Wood Street was the reason that I stayed out of jail for as long as I did. After I got out and Wood Street, I came to Wood Street because my folks were there, and it actually kept people out of returning into that system or going back to ways of life that like they had to resort to because of the conditions. And like that's the thing. And like that's not isolated to Wood Street. Like every unhoused community that I've encountered in Oakland, just through the sweep support and otherwise, like it's folks using what they have to like make sure each other gets fed, make sure and like of course beef is going to happen. We're human beings. Like yeah, people are going to fight, but like those fights don't like escalate to a point where like we lose someone or like someone gets really hurt, or like because we know that we need each other. It's not the violence that they depict us as like being a part of. And
it's a mutual beneficial society. Like the society that you build is built around mutual benefit. That like, you know, that makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah, community.
And like that's the thing. And like, and even like things like theft, like that'll happen, but like because you're in a community, like you can talk it out. Like if someone's saying like you let someone borrow something and then like they still have it and you're asking for it back and they're being like, oh, well, actually my second cousin gave me that. It's like, no, I just gave that to you like a couple of days ago. So like it's easier to navigate those things. So like it's actually even more unlikely that like the theft that they talk about is going to occur in these communities because you already know each other. So it's a lot like you just can't get away with it. Or like there's enough people that'll band around and be like, okay, hey, we saw it. You took that thing. We need it back. Like you can use it again later. We just like, so it's like these way, like there's already like a non-carceral way of dealing with quote unquote crime that organically develops in these communities, because crime is created by the police. Like if you have people enforcing and like say like this coming through and like you have like people disconnected from each other, and like it makes people dependent on the police because they're disconnected from their community, because it's like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this stranger who's done this thing, or like it looks like they're going to do this thing, so I'm going to call this body that's designated to do that, that just recreates the same system that's creating that desperation in the first place. Whereas like when you have people just existing that can't rely on that system, because that's the very system that's discarded them and done harm to them and will put us at risk, so we intentionally don't engage with police, it forces people to like think of ways like how when these things do come up, because we know we're all like trauma, like we all have trauma, we're all hard, like we're all in a desperate situation, but how do we feel out what we do have capacity for and then grow that together, so we aren't strangers just taking shit from each other. Like, and like people like love to talk about like interpersonal theft, but nobody likes to talk about the way like gentrification and evictions and sweeps are all of like theft and extended from like the inception of like colonial theft that like started this country. Like homelessness exists because like settler colonialism happened. Like
that's right.
Like the original people that lived here, and it's like we can't separate these things. So like any liberation of like unhouseless is going to be intrinsically tied to like liberation of First Nations people, and like that will actually teach us how to grow out of these systems and learn better ways of like naturally being in community together. Like once we get rid of all the lies of rent and like all the and private property and all the shit that's actually forcing us into these conditions of poverty and houselessness.
Right on. Absolutely.
Yeah. And seriously, it's just so funny too, because it sounds like having the encampments, or at least large ones that can set up their own support systems like Wood Street, seem better than the sweeps. Because for one, the sweeps just seem to push people to another section of the city. They're not actually, getting people off the streets. The number of encampments continues to grow. I mean, from 140 in 2020 to over 1,400 last year. So it seems like they should just let the camps happen. How would you feel about a plan like that?
Well, and like that's something that like a bunch of groups of us have been talking about, like that there needs to be like temporary sanctuary spaces where people can be until housing can be made available, and like community-based housing that is like governed by the folks that live there and like is built from starting from their community dynamics and what their needs are and what their strengths are, and building from that. And that like a temporary version of that is just like there's a bunch of empty plots of land that the city owns, and there's also empty buildings that the city owns, or that like, or tax defunct property that like the city could, if it chose, could open up for folks who need a space to be until they can get access to housing, where they can still get access to services, they can still get access to like getting their paperwork in order and all the different things that folks need to do, but they can still live with the folks that they live with and just be safe. And there could be trash services like any other housing place or business, so we don't have the same trash pile up that like happens at the communities. Like that's something we've been trying to push for years, is just like, hey, instead of just telling people to put their trash in a pile near where they live and that you'll come pick it up, just put a dumpster there. Like, yeah, there's still going to be illegal dumping, but at least you'll be in something contained that you can then pick up and dump somewhere. So there's just not a bunch of trash in the street, which is like, but like, that's the thing. The city knows exactly what it's doing. Like they are creating the trash accumulation because they need an excuse to violently sweep people so that they can get them into a position where they're forced to take refuge in the shitty shelters that they are getting sexually assaulted at, that they are getting like physically assaulted at, that there like is sex trafficking and like drug dealing happening in these shelter spaces, that people are getting pushed into or forced into congregate shelter that they can only stay for the night. And it's like that's intentional. Like the whack-a-mole that they're playing with people's lives is like they want to separate the communities that have been created. They want people to be isolated in the street so that they're easier to pick off. Like the way SF has it, they're doing 3 sweeps a day because people aren't living in big, robust communities for the most part. They're living like a couple people or like one person in like a tent somewhere. So it's much easier for them to just swoop in, pick them off, and then be like, well, if you don't want the shelter, too bad. That's what we got. And they're trying to recreate that situation in Oakland, but it's a lot harder to do because you have a lot of like robust long-term like people that have been living in community for a long time because they got gentrified out of the neighborhoods that they were living in and ended up on the streets outside, and they're still living together because they're their folks. Like, and that I think that's something the city doesn't realize, is that's going to be a really hard tie to break, and that they are going to have to come up with a like or concede to a more sustainable solution, instead of continuing this violence of trying to separate people so they can just pick them off easier and force them into carceral shelters that aren't actually going to help the situation. And it's just like becoming like a money void. It's just like it's getting thrown, like it cycles through their pockets, but it doesn't actually do anything about the actual conditions on the ground.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much of that money is going to administrative costs, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, buddy. But also on top of that, you know, the one thing that, again, like I keep coming back to is, and especially because you're such a wonderful representative of, is the people, the residents of these encampments are people. And a lot of the times too, it seems like, especially from the people I could talk to, it's just circumstances that they can't control and no one can help them that forces them into encampments. I mean, you know, like they want to paint people as you know, drug addicts that just need help, but how much of it more is about, as you say, like being gentrified, like just these awful high rents and a one misstep, one medical emergency sending these people to the encampments.
Yeah.
Also predatory capitalism, and then, you know, and how capitalism is actually in a whole lot of ways in this late stage. And I find it interesting that what they do is they try to make a systemic problem a personal one almost every time, right? So like this is a systemic problem. It's about affordable housing. It's about a collapsing job market. It's about a collapsing economy. It's about the destruction of public space and public service.
Yeah.
And so like, but it's about drugs, you know, because we don't really want to talk about what's really going on at all.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. And like that's the thing. It's like it's like basically just a new iteration of the war on drugs that's extended to this war on the poor. And it's like, and now they got like new drug, like they keep saying, oh, there's this new dangerous drug, because they keep filtering this shit into our communities on purpose because they want to come up with something more dangerous, more deadly, that will addict people harder and like will be able to will have the effects that will make people like be perceived as the way they're describing, when really people are turning to these things out of desperation and need, because because this is a systemic problem and there are no individual ways out of it. Like you're left to bear with the weight of that every day. And like that, like everyone has their trauma and their stuff, but like until you've lived that kind of like daily, like knowing there's no way out of your situation and you're getting this daily onslaught of just like people being like, you're not good enough, or you're trash, or you didn't try hard enough, when literally all you do every fucking day is try to survive under these conditions. And like, yeah, most of the people like I know, it's like, yeah, the rent went too high and they couldn't afford it anymore, so they got evicted, or they lost a job, or they got injured on a job and then they couldn't afford to pay for their housing anymore, so they're out on the street trying to recover from an injury but also don't have housing, so they're losing access to medical. and all the different things. Or like, yeah, like like family, like people having their houses bought out from under them by the city, and like then they're getting kicked, their whole family's getting kicked to the street, or like a family member just like it's like doing some shady shit with like the housing and then kicking certain people out or like claiming ownership. And it's like there's like all sorts of different things that like this system allows for, that like, and then you have developers coming into neighborhoods, which then raises the rent, and like landlords sitting on empty buildings just so they can keep their rents high or keep raising them, because they know if they let people move into those empty buildings, then they'd have to lower the rents or like create an average. And it's like, so like all this shit that's like allowing landlords and developers to make all this money, and then the city in turn to get money from the developments and the landlord, and like taxpayer money and all that. Like it just fucks the people that like got evicted and gentrified even more, and like, but then continues to paint them as the issue of like, oh, you're the reason my development isn't getting enough business, is because you look poor and you're looking poor outside of my development, so I need the city to sweep you. And it's just like, well, no, you made me poor, you put me here outside of your development, and now you're saying that I'm the reason that you can't do business, when clearly you're doing business because you're fucking here, and I'm the one out here not without anything to eat or like any like shelter for the night. And it's all backwards, and it's all like the resources exist to solve it. Like I know Oakland is like touting like, oh, we're in this big deficit, oh, we like don't have any money or resources, and it's just like, but you're spending over $6 million at least a year on sweeps and temporary shelters, and it's like you could spend less than that same amount of money to house people. Like the cost of one sweep could like get 12 people access to permanent housing. So it's like, and the communities that they're sweeping are usually around that size, if not less, or maybe a little bit more, or if it's a larger community, maybe twice that size. So it's like, if you just stopped the sweeps operation and used that money for housing, you would get the thing that the city says they want to do with the sweeps, which is get people off the streets. You would have done in a way less traumatic, way less violent, way less harmful way of doing it. But it's the same outcome. It's the outcome that supposedly everyone wants, but it's the outcome that they can't make a profit off of. So if it's an outcome that they can't profit off of, they're not going to do it, even though it's the humane thing to do. And it's what everybody who's actually gone through it is asking for, because they've been through it. They know what works and what doesn't. But they're not, the people that have been through it aren't trying to get a return on their investment like the city is. Like, they just want to be fucking safe.
Yeah, and the cruelty is the point too. I think also too, there's
absolutely,
there's a side of this, or at least an intention that's like, we want to show what if you're gonna live on the streets, this is what you should be treated like. We want people to be treated like this,
right?
You know? It's brutal. Now, I understand the Wood Street encampment, you guys are still meeting and stuff. Is that a big part too of the volunteers who helped out with that sweep that I reported on? Were those folks involved with Wood Street? And what do the meetings, what is the group like now?
Yeah, no, like we're definitely interconnected. Like a lot of the folks that have like moved through the sweep space were folks that I met through Wood Street organizing, and like folks that came out to support us when we were getting swept. But we've also had like a big wave of new folks recently, just since Grants Pass. Like more people have been becoming aware of the like direness of the situation, even though it's always been dire. But I feel like Grants Pass kind of put it on the map more for folks to realize, oh, there's violence being done to poor people on a grand scale. But so like we've definitely gotten more new folks involved who maybe weren't as familiar with Wood Street, because Wood Street had already been swept at that point when Grants Pass happened. But now I've been like telling them about what we've been up to and like creating like cross population there. Cause like, yeah, we like, that's the thing. Like we took a big loss when our community was taken from us. Like they took the physical space. of our community, and they disbanded many of us, like, because at our height, we were a community of like 300 people, like, so, and they just scattered us between Caltrans and the city. But like a handful of us that were like organizing on the city plot of land and like trying to rally support when those sweeps were happening, and like coordinating food and supply drops, and like we're keeping up the free store and the like community kitchen that we had on site, and like all the different things, and like the common areas, making sure that they like got clean so that people who needed them could like stay in them, like, and that we're helping move, like organizing the trash days where we would all like get together and move trash to the designated dump pile where the city was supposed to come pick it up. Like we were like making that happen, doing our part. And like that created sort of like a natural rhythm, and like built a lot of the like community ties and like flows of care that just came naturally from being in space, like living together. But that when that was taken away from us, we had to like shift and try to really intentionally regroup. It's like now we're like, we want to keep that work going and bring those flows of care to other communities that still exist and have a physical space, like bringing like the support we were able to build on Wood Street and bring those folks to them, and like do like create more of a network between communities so we can be deeper in solidarity with one another, and that we can kind of unify more our messages. Because like that's the thing, like a lot of the things that people want are like similar across the board in terms of like a safe place to be with the folks that they're already connected to, and like not wanting to get harassed by the city, and just like be able to like get out of this like rut that they've been forced into. And like, so it took a lot of intention on us, like being in different spaces to like find the times where we could get back together and be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna cook for this community on this day, and we're gonna bring these clothes and harm reduction supplies and all this, like, and so we like are coordinating outreach, but we're also like talking to folks about like getting them involved in the homeless union, signing them up, so like when we do big petitions or like potential lawsuits, like they can be included in that. And then also like hearing from folks, like what are their visions of liberation, what are their needs as a community, and like figuring out like what can we do as folks that were in it. And like so, like a fair amount of us now have like gotten access to housing, like many through like Lifelong and Hack and other orgs. I just have a very sweet boyfriend who is letting me stay in his place, and is like so blessed to have him in my life and to be able to have access to that, so I could still do this work with everybody. But yeah, like that's the thing, it's taken a more intentionality of like finding the space to be with each other. But it's hard because it's like we also like need to be more intentional about when we have time to just like hang and be in community with each other and other folks. It's like that just like that happened when we were living together, and now that space has been taken away. So now it feels like a lot of the time when we're meeting, it's like, oh, we got to do all these meetings, we're like on it 24/7, and we need to like make space to just be like human together too, and finding what that space looks like with the communities that we're supporting too, is like making sure we're like, yeah, we're talking about the organizing, but like part of that organizing is being human beings, and like understanding each other's lives intimately enough that we can show up for each other in a real way, and that trust is there. Because like that's the like last thing that the systems of oppression can't actually take away from us, is the relationships that we build with each other and the trust that we build. Like that's the thing they can't break, and that's the thing that they're always going to try to break as much as possible. But that's the thing that keeps us going and is going to make the actual solutions possible when enough of us are deeply connected to each other. That
couldn't be any more true than as of today. Like that could not be any more true. And I think everyone should be really trying to figure out ways to do that. Just what you just said. I mean, I'm talking about whether you're homeless or you're like, you know, just up against it, because we're all going to be up against it in a little bit of time. I think all of us should be doing that. All of us should be doing that right now.
Yeah. Not just meeting up to, you know, to organize, but to meet up and just be human and just hang with each other. I love that, you know, and build that community spirit. I love it. Well, this has been amazing, Jaz. I mean, you've really enlightened me. You've this. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time just to break all this stuff down. This has been an amazing interview. And I just want to know from your perspective, especially for our audience, what can regular people do that want to get involved? Like, what are the best ways for people to get involved and help, especially with the sweeps and stuff like that?
Yeah, like I feel like it starts with like, just building relationships, deep community, talk to the unhoused folks near, like if you're housed, talk to unhoused folks, get to know them, offer, don't come empty handed, be like, have like some food or something. And like, be like, hey, like wanted to just check in, see what was up. I live like nearby, or like start like building that kind of trust relationship with folks. And then you'll see, like, it'll become clear, like, oh, these are just folks going through it and they're doing it. And it'll be clear what they need and how, like, you can tap in, and like also do that with like your housed neighbors too, like just the people around. Cause like we're kind of, I feel like, encouraged as a society now to like live in our isolated bubbles. And like, we don't really know, like unhoused, like you have to know the people around you out of safety. And just like, you need to find the people you can be close to. But like, I feel like for house people, there's not as much stress there to like know your neighbors, like who's in the apartment next door, who's in the house by you. It's like, but like actually building those relationships too, and figuring out who you can trust in that community. And then you have more people to then like connect with your unhoused communities and like make sure, and you can find out who, like, unfortunately, who the potential threats are. Cause like there are folks out there who are just really violently against unhoused people, just on like with no content, like just like they've drank the Kool-Aid, they just see it and they don't want it. And like that's important to know too, so that you know, okay, who are the people that we can rally to protect folks if like someone does decide to like call 311 or does decide to just like ransack some unhoused person's shit because they just don't want it there, which I've totally seen happen. And it's like, it's about, how do we know who can keep us safe and who we can help keep safe together? And then like the vision of what's possible comes from those connections. Like the more you get to know people and your own capacities and access to resources, you can vision, okay, what is it, the thing that we all want to see, and how can we make it happen with what we got? And like just encouraging. And as far as like Oakland specifically, if folks want to reach out to like Oakland Revealed Instagram, if you're interested, and like we do workshops and we can let people know when to come to those workshops for the sweep stuff. You can also give out my number if you want to folks who sound interested. But yeah, like I think it really just comes from like building those relationships and assessing what our capacities are and access is, and building from where we are.
Love it. That's great. And I will share that information in the links of the episode. Again, this has been a great episode. I'm so glad we finally made this happen.
Yeah. We finally got it together, and I think this is really, thank you for enlightening me on some things that I kind of assumed, and a couple of the things I just never even considered. And I will be getting involved as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. Seriously,
I really appreciate you all.
Yeah, and we'll put these links up, and everyone else too who's listening in, please follow us on all the socials, X, Instagram, TikTok, I guess we can still have it. Yeah, who knows what's going on with that. And please support us on Patreon so we can pay our bills. Yes. Again, Jaz, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, so strong.
And for everyone listening in, keep fighting the good fight.
Keep fighting the good fight.